Hello there folks, and I am back again today for another video looking at something a little bit different. This time around we're not talking about Middle Earth, but we're talking about something a little bit sort of funky and weird from the world of fantasy wargaming that maybe you don't know much about, but I think deserves to have a little bit more time in the sun. So this is the Red Book of the Elf King, which comes from Lucid Eye Publications, with rules written by Rick Priestley. Rick Priestley will be a name familiar to many a wargamer because he was instrumental in the first edition of sort of Rogue Trader and the successive birth of Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but also had a hand in the Middle-earth strategy battle game when that first rolled around as well. So there's a little bit of a link to what we normally talk about here on the channel. But what is the Red Book of the Elf King? So the Red Book of the Elf King is by Lucid Eye, and it kind of takes things a little bit of a different direction when it comes to how you appreciate and understand elves. Elves within this world aren't your typical, well, they're still haughty and prim and proper, as you might have imagined, but they come at things from a very different viewpoint. I would say that the Red Book of the Elf King approaches things from the elven point of view of them being more entwined with Norse mythology, Germanic mythology from Europe, the evolving feel of Fae and look of Fae from British, Gaelic, Irish folklore, and that kind of take on them. They are sort of above and beyond everything else that exists within the world, almost even within their own sort of sense of self-importance, I guess you'd say. They are more immortal beings that do not eat, they do not sleep, and so they have to spend time warring and thinking about other things to do with their growing and waning empires throughout their lives. The focus around the story for the Red Book of the Elf King is pretty fascinating, and that it's all about the Elf King himself, who was somewhat denied by many of his captains and his followers, and so the sort of focus of what the story is when it comes to the Red Book of the Elf King is one where you now have to suddenly decide what happens within the elven civil war that has brewed between the different captains, which we'll look at a little bit later. The game itself uses a range of d6s, but also d10s as well. The d6s are used to kind of work out how many action counters you have when you start playing out a turn, and the d10s are used for the resolving of other actions within the game. Here's kind of like a typical stat line and how it's broken down. So you have an idea of who the warrior is. You have their move characteristic, which dictates how far they can move. And then you have attacks and range, so attack is based on melee, and then ranged is based on their kind of ranged attacks effectively. And what you see there is that it means that they will attack twice at a value of 5 and twice at a value of 3. An interesting element of the Red Book of the Elf King is that ranged attacks are, as you can see here, it's not bowmen as such. Every elf has the ability to manifest glamours or some kind of energy or magic, and so in this sense, rude magic is used to attack your foes. You also have a defense value, which will be you're rolling against to try and prevent yourself from taking wounds. You have wounds themselves, and then a courage value, which dictates whether or not you're going to run away, as is the case with a lot of games. So one of the nice things about the game is that when you're going to be rolling a test, you will roll a d10, and if you are able to, as it says here, match between or under, effectively, the value of the roll, then you will succeed. So if it was a d10 test against a value of 7, as you can see there, 1 to 7 will succeed, and an 8 to 10 will fail. And obviously you just roll the dice together if you're going to be doing something with a unit on the tabletop. There are sort of mitigations and all that kind of thing that will come into play based on what else is happening. But when you do damage to an individual, you will then kind of take the wounds that they suffered, and you'll make defense rolls based on that against your armor, and then you will dictate, well, you'll find out whether or not the foe has been wounded by an attack, or if they have just been outright killed by something, depending on the amount of damage they've taken, because obviously everything has different wound qualities in the game. What's also quite nice about the game is that it has kind of draw from the bag thing going on. So as you can see here, you'll roll for action counters, and then you'll put the counters that you've generated into the draw bag. And then during the action phase, you'll draw a counter, and you'll be able to activate those characters, which I think is quite nice. And then you'll go through the game. You'll go through all of the different steps for each individual unit, and then you'll keep drawing counters and such as you go until the end of the turn, and then you'll do the same action counter roll once again, which I think is quite nice. What I really like as well is this thing here. So once all of your units have one counter, each can be given a second action the same way until every unit has 2 counters. So I think it's a really nice it's a really nice way to mitigate good and bad luck in a way, which I think is quite nice, wherein such that you can kind of put all of your effort into just using your one leader figure perhaps and doing lots of heroic things, but you might only have X amount of tokens with which to do all of this stuff with, so you're going to have to take that into account when looking at the likes of objective tokens and all that kind of stuff. The actual gameplay of the Red Book of the Elf King is fairly simple in many regards. More often than not, you'll find that you have turns going quite quickly. And with such a low model count as well, you'll find that a lot of the time there's a focus on kind of tactical thinking and narrative play rather than it just being just a big old brawl, really, which I think is quite nice. You also have glamours. So glamours are spells that can be cast by individual elements of your warband, so namely your characters, which we'll look at in a second when I show off some of the models and things. But one of the things, you can obviously just use the book and you can generate spells that way, but folks at Lucid Eye also did this. I probably should have come up with some way to get these cards out before trying to do it live on camera. There we go. So yeah, it doesn't matter about those. So you have some stat cards and stuff in there for the different characters, which we'll look at in a second. But then each of the glamours is available on these cards, so you can make a deck of these, and then you can just draw at random, determining what spells you can use. There are some characters who are better at casting spells and some characters that are worse at doing so, and you'll just basically draw from a random deck and see what you can play with, which I think is quite nice. So yeah, Magic's pretty interesting in this game, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a second. So yeah, as you can see, rulebook's broken down into a couple of different sections. A lot of the kind of core rules of the game are sort of basically in this first bit, really. They're covered in these pages, essentially, and then you're into kind of all the different spells, and then we get to the characters themselves. So one of the nice things about this game as well is that essentially there are 2 types of model for you to worry about. There are your heroes, your thanes, and then there are the companions that go into battle with them. And what happens when you pick a thane is you get the thane. So for example, if it was Vashel Golden Hand, which we see here. So here's Vashel Golden Hand. And then he will get access to his own special abilities, his own stat line, as you can see here. So, for example, Vashel carries a Sword of 1,000 Suns, which allows him to strike with a strike bonus of 3, which is pretty awesome. So you roll -3 from your defense roll. And then he also comes with the Hand of Gold, which is his once-a-game ability, which I think is pretty awesome. And then you will get access to companions that are based around him. So one of the things about Vashel is that he is really bad at casting magic. He has a glam of 0 because he is very much the sword master, effectively, of the Red Book of the Elf King. And so his companions, if attacked by rude magic, no courage test is required on account of hits struck or wounds inflicted, because they hate magic and they will not be bound by it. And then you have some other interesting ones here. So I think I've got some of the cool ones. So you've got Lorik Angersand here, who comes from Ekana. So he wields the twin blades of Irenveil. And here we have Lorik. I'm going to put some better photos of these characters in the community tab later today. so you can have a look at some of the painted models in a lot more detail rather than on this darkening camera as the daylight fades. And then he gets, as you can see, his own set of companions, and his companions are very much similar to the rest of them, but they, for example, have the thirst for battle. If charging into close combat, then the unit can re-roll one failed attack test. If the unit has failed more than one test, the player can decide which to re-roll. As always, 1s and 10s stand. So that's positives and negatives when it comes to failures and such, and can only be re-rolled once. So another awesome little thing. And then as you go through, you'll see that each of the different characters, so Salian Trollblood, who's like the Loki of this world. Here's Salian Trollblood. They will each have their own set of companions, and you will essentially just build up a force like that. Now, generally in the game, building up a warband is pretty simple, in so much as you'll have a Thane, and then you'll have a number of warbands of companions split into units of 3. This is the sort of learning scenario that comes in the game, which is kind of like a meeting battle, as it were. And so the focus here is on kind of like a smaller warband of troops. And obviously it's all about just killing the opposing warband. As you'll see here, you kind of got some sort of basic setups for what you get. So instead of there being 6 warbands of 3 companions, you only get well, instead of 6 units, you get 3 units of companions instead. So you've got less units to play around with, but it just sort of makes it a little bit easier when it comes to learning how to play the game. And then they kind of put together a set of introductory glamours for both sets. One of them is much more focused on high skill spellcasters, and then the other one is set for those that aren't very good at spellcasting, as it were, which I think is quite nice. But yeah, and then you've got a set of different scenarios that's kind of built on the game as you go through, finishing off with a very cool one about the Elf King awakening and striking back. And then you have the Battle of the Troll Shores, where you get to meet 2 new characters, at least from this initial first version of the book, which is Kufnir and Kufnir's troll companions, which is very cool, and we'll talk about them in a second, and also an expansive video in the near future. So yeah, getting started in the Red Book of the Elf King is fairly simple. Essentially, you pick you pick a companion. You pick a Thane that you like the look of. So maybe you really like Vashel Goldenhand, and then you pick up a bunch of different companion sets, as you can see here, and you'll use these to build up your little warbands. So, for example, I've got a few. So we have Vashel Goldenhand there. We have Lorik that we saw there. I'm gonna forget the names, which is the worst thing here. So then we have, who else do I have access? So we have Aurelia, which is this lady here, who's like a pirate queen spellcaster, was kind of taken off into darkness and shadow and returned to the land as if nothing had happened, which is very cool. We have Salian troll blood here, who's kind of like your, as I said, low-key figure in the game. Another very nice model. And then I also got the red elf, who I painted up as what's his name? Elric of Meldebone in my Meldebene, I think that's how you meant to say it. But yes, that's another one of the cool models. And then once you've chosen your character, your Thane, you'll then paint up your various companions. So these are a couple of companions that I painted up to match Vashel, because I wanted to give him the red shields, just like Vashel had. And then once you've painted up your companions, you're good to go, essentially, when it comes to playing the game. This fellow over here is actually just one of the models from the Jim Fitzpatrick collection that they do, but I wanted to show him off because he's pretty awesome and kind of fits within the aesthetic of what they do for the Red Book of the Elf King anyway. So yeah, I think each of these sets is fairly cheap in the round. And as I say, you get a set of metal models. The spears and the shields come separate. Let's have a quick look at one of these, actually, just so we can, so I can give you a little bit of a better look at them as a set. Oh, it's going to be hell putting those back together. So yeah, here we go. So yeah, as you can see, very cool metal models. And then you just got to stick the spear in there and the shield on there, and away you go, really. And there's quite a few different poses now, actually, because they did quite a few with the initial release of the game, and then they've expanded it since then, really, which I think is quite nice. And you get the separate shields as well, so you can stick those on. And it's all about just really painting them up to match the companions that you want, to be honest. What I think is quite nice about the game is that kind of you don't have a lot of models to pick from, but then you kind of painting style is the thing that kind of dictates where things go creatively with the game. Like, I wanted to go with the idea of them all wearing bronze gold armor because iron is bad for elves and the Fae when it comes to like actual folklore mythology. And then I wanted to do different skin colors, so I did Salian in red, I did Olea in blue, Lorik because he was slightly more of a wild elf, I did in green. And then Vashel, Golden Hand, was in yellow because I thought it looked pretty cool. And then all of my companions I thought would be kind of lesser. So I painted them with kind of like this pale, almost strange, ethereal skin. And I think that worked quite nicely for them. But yeah, you've got a lot of things you can do when it comes to customizing your warbands and stuff when it comes to painting. Just basically paint them up in the style of model that you prefer. Or just paint a set of 6 sets of 3 effectively, and then just use the same companions for whatever leader, whatever thane that you want, which I think is quite nice. And as you can see, I've got quite a few packs of these companions that I need to finally get around to painting at some point. But they're all more or less the same, so they all come with the different designs and armor, but they're essentially the same models profile wise, and you just choose the different spears that you want. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and obviously 6. So I've got a whole bunch of different companions here to play around with and use in my games. I also got myself the King model, but this is a pretty hefty metal pack, and it's one of those sets that I think probably would require pinning, I think, because he's a very heavy boy. In terms of other stuff that they do, so you have the glamour deck that I showed you. So this comes with all the different glamours, but it also comes, at least when it initially came out, because it's been a little while since I looked at this, there are stat cards for each of the thanes and then their appropriate companions. So if you're looking for an easy way to kind of keep abreast of what's happening at the tabletop, you've got these options here in order to do so. There's also background in the book for each of the different thanes. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Vashel, then you can do so, which I think is quite nice. As well as the book and all the models and everything, and the cards. They also did this. I don't think the dice bag is available anymore. I'm going to do like a follow-up video about all of this. But they kind of did a dice bag which came with all of the dice that you need. So here's the D6s and stuff that you need, and then there's the D10s. And they were done in red and yellow, of course, so that they could match the colours of the Red Book of the Elf King. That's also a really nice dice bag. But they also did a token set as well. Now, I know a lot of people will probably just use dragon gems or like dragon poos or whatever they call them nowadays. But they also did these. So these kind of match up to each of the different leaders. And you had tokens for each of the different Thane companions. And you could use these to mark the various characters within your warband and stuff like that. And stuff. So you also had lots of wound markers and everything in there as well. So I'm just going to take a few more out just so you can see what they look like. I mean, you know, not the greatest thing, but they looked pretty cool, and very nice way to mark things in a thematic fashion on the tabletop. As I say, I'm not sure if they do these anymore, but I'm going to have a link down to the web store in the comments below, so you can have a look at that and think about diving in. Now, as I say, what you see here is kind of what's available for the core game of Red Book of the Elf King, but I'm going to follow up with another video which actually looks at a few more of the things that have been brought out for the Red Book of the Elf King, so you can delve a little bit deeper into all of that. But hopefully this has given you an interesting look at a fantasy game that you probably didn't know about. But if you're interested in the grandeur and the storytelling and the mythology of the likes of the Silmarillion, then I think the Red Book of the Elf King is definitely a game to go and dive into and have fun with, because it's one where things are very focused on a particular kind of faction in many ways. Like, it's a game which is just full of elves, but it's all about this elf civil war, and there's lots of nuance between each of the different characters, and the gameplay is very simple and easy to learn, so you can play some really nice narrative games that have a focus on the idea of telling mythological folklore style stories on the tabletop. And as you can see, hopefully from what you've seen here, the models are very, very nice. But anyway, I'll do a little gallery for those. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's been informative and helpful. Make sure to go and check out all the links down below to get your hands on some more Red Book of the Elf King stuff for yourself. As I say, there's going to be a little bit of a follow-up video looking at what else is coming out for the game and what is available for the game over on the web store. And from there, hopefully this will be something that you'll go and check out for yourself and play a couple of games using the range. I really like the look of this. I absolutely loved it when it first came out on preview and delved a little bit deeper into the game. I think they've done a really solid job with the Red Book of the Elf King, both as a model range and as a quick and fun and easy game to play on the tabletop. And I think a lot of people would have a lot of fun with it. Also, I would suggest that pretty much all of the models from the range would be amazing to use in something Silmarillion based if you're going to go down the route of using them for Middle-earth stuff, because they just look phenomenal. But yeah, make sure to go and have a look at all of those. As I say, make sure to go and check out the links down below. As always, like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that lovely good stuff that you people have been doing in the community. And if you have any thoughts, put them down to the comments below. There's also the link to the Ko-fi down there, so if you are interested in what I do and you want to help out, then you can donate that way. And I'll buy myself some cups of tea, or maybe even put some money towards new models. As I said in the last video, donations there have helped me pick up some more stuff for my Uruk-hai warband, and that is now finished. And anything else will gladly be used to keep the channel afloat and keep things going. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to move on and get ready for another video, and hopefully this has been informative and interesting, and I'll be back soon. Bye for now.